Well, if you did not have contempt for this Congress before today's chaotic, dramatic, comical, and important hearing in the House of Representatives, then you might be feeling just a little bit of contempt tonight.
Let me start by saying this is a stupid and ridiculous hearing.
Republicans in the House of Representatives today once again tried and failed to prove that the connections of the Trump campaign to Russia should never have been investigated by the FBI because one of the FBI agents involved in that investigation agreed with the majority of American voters at the time that candidate Donald Trump should not be elected president. FBI agent Peter Strzok was the only witness in today's spectacle in the House of Representatives because he sent private text messages expressing his opposition to candidate Trump during the campaign. Because this was a House of Representatives hearing, most of it was irrelevant. That is not unusual in House hearings. But much of the hearing was histrionic and out of control and incoherent to a degree that we have never seen before. Agent Strzok's defense of his fairness and objectivity in his work as an FBI agent was this.
I can assure you, Mr. Chairman, at no time in any of these texts did those personal beliefs ever enter into the realm of any action I took. Furthermore, this isn't just me sitting here telling you, you don't have to take my word for it. At every step, at every investigative decision, there are multiple layers of people above me, the assistant director, executive assistant director, deputy director, and director of the FBI, and multiple layers of people below me, section chiefs, supervisors, unit chiefs, case agents, and analysts, all of whom were involved in all of these decisions. They would not tolerate any improper behavior in me any more than I would tolerate it in them. That is who we are as the FBI. And the suggestion that I, in some dark chamber somewhere in the FBI, would somehow cast aside all of these procedures, all of these safeguards, and somehow be able to do this is astounding to me. It simply couldn't happen. And the proposition that that is going on, that it might occur anywhere in the FBI, deeply corrodes what the FBI is in American society, the effectiveness of their mission, and it is deeply destructive.
The Republicans never penetrated that defense. Every word of that defense held up for the full 9 hours and 41 minutes of that hearing. The Republicans have never been able to identify a single action taken by Agent Strzok because of Agent Strzok's political opinions expressed in those texts, or because of anyone else's political opinions. Republicans in the House seem to believe that the best lawyer among them is former prosecutor Trey Gowdy, and so they gave Trey Gowdy extra questioning time today, but that just meant that Trey Gowdy ended up causing more minutes of chaos than anyone else.
So your testimony...
His time has expired, Mr. Chairman.
Your testimony
by 2.5 minutes.
Impeachment for what, Agent Strzok? Impeachment for what?
Second of all, Mr. Chairman, what are the rules here?
The gentleman from Louisiana is
the witness not going to be permitted to answer the question?
That's how I read it.
Mr.
If
Chairman,
I thought it was likely,
Mr. Chairman,
I'd be there, no question.
You are assuming someone else's
I hesitate in
position.
part. Were you under duress?
Asked and answered over and over again.
You don't want it to be you and Lisa Page.
Mr. Chairman,
and you don't want it to be the FBI.
Are we not given 5 minutes to answer questions? We have indulged this harassment 9 minutes.
The Republicans reached many new heights of absurdity, including threatening the witness with contempt of Congress when he testified that there were questions he could not answer because the FBI's lawyers had ordered him as an FBI employee to not answer those questions. That brought a challenge from Democrat Eric Swalwell, who pointed out that the same Republican members of Congress allowed Steve Bannon not to answer any question that he chose not to answer when they questioned him.
Mr. Chairman, I move to subpoena Steve Bannon. In our House intelligence investigation, he was under subpoena. He refused a number of times to answer questions of Mr. Gowdy. Mr. Gowdy appears to have a sincere interest in getting to the bottom of what happened, and so I move under Rule 11 to bring Mr. Bannon to this committee. So I move now for consideration for Mr. Bannon to be subpoenaed. And if he refuses, for contempt proceedings to occur.
Eric Swalwell will lead off our discussion in a moment. After that, the Republicans spent the rest of the day trying and failing to cast doubt on the honesty of Agent Strzok's under oath testimony. Ultimately, Texas Republican Louis Gohmert just couldn't take it anymore. And so he decided to do something that is actually not permitted in House hearings. He repeatedly called the under oath witness a liar and then went in for the kill in a very personal way.
You've embarrassed yourself, and I can't help but wonder when I see you looking there with a little smirk, how many times did you look so innocent into your wife's eye and lie to her about Lisa?
Mr. Chairman, this is outrageous.
Needless to say, Louis Gohmert has never said that Donald Trump's multiple extramarital affairs during his multiple marriages have given Congressman Gohmert any reason to ever doubt a single word that Donald Trump has ever said. Leading off our discussion now is Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell from California. He's a member of the Judiciary and the Intelligence Committees in the House. And Congressman Swalwell, really appreciate you being here today. We all know how long your workday has been already. What would you say are the most important points established in this hearing today?
Good evening, Lawrence. Of course, first would be wrong hearing, wrong priorities. We should be doing all we can as the Committee of Jurisdiction to reunite these kids who are separated, and wrong priorities if they are going to have Mr. Strzok come in, because he knew a lot about why the Russia investigation was launched. He was concerned about contacts that the campaign was having with the Russians, and they wanted to just focus on going back in time to Hillary Clinton's emails and undermining the Mueller investigation. But I pointed out in my questioning, one, that Mr. Strzok was not the only individual to close the Clinton investigation. There were a lot of people involved in that decision, and he was not the only individual to open the Trump-Russia investigation. So we were able to corroborate that there was a lot of other evidence out there. So even if you didn't like his text messages, and I don't, that is irrelevant to the mountain of evidence that existed that would warrant any FBI agent to be concerned about Donald Trump and his contacts with Russia.
And in the Agent Strzok's testimony today, was there anything in that testimony where you or anyone else in the committee learned something that you didn't already know? No, Lawrence. We did, however, learn that the Republicans, for them, this was more about protecting Donald Trump rather than, as I said, protecting kids who are separated from their families, high schoolers who want us to do something about gun violence, farmers who want this committee to do something about the tariffs the president is imposing. But we learned nothing new from Mr. Strzok. We just lost precious hours where the American people are counting on us to fight for them. And we were just seeing Republicans again seeking to protect the president above anything else. And did you hear any line of questioning from Republicans that you thought was actually somehow helpful and informative to our understanding of what's been happening here? No, but Lawrence, I did hear Mr. Gowdy express a real interest in having Mr. Strzok answer questions about an ongoing investigation. And again, this is a pattern we've seen throughout the last year, which is they want to break the safe of the FBI evidence locker and have evidence come to light so that subjects of the investigation know what is out there. But when Mr. Strzok refused to answer, now he was all of a sudden going to be held in contempt, which if that's the case and we want to know what he has to say, that same interest should have been shown for Mr. Bannon, which is why I moved to have Mr. Bannon subpoenaed. And of course, that was voted down. But interestingly enough, Mr. Gowdy did not vote yes or no on that. He actually abstained from voting when that was put before him. Yeah, and there was a request for a clarification of how he was voting, because I've never seen this in a roll call vote in a committee before. He used the word pass when the votes are yes or no. There's no other response to the vote, and he said pass. And so Democrats insisted on a clarification, and that's when he went silent when the roll call was called again. What do you make of that decision of his to not vote at all on that question that you raised? Well, I think he knows better. He wasn't going to give us a vote there, but I think he wasn't going to really contradict his position at the House Intelligence Committee, which was that Bannon should have been subpoenaed. So I think his silence actually spoke volumes, that he knew it was wrong to try and pursue a contempt proceeding against Mr. Strzok, but not to do that against Mr. Bannon and so many other Trump administration witnesses who refused to tell us anything. And by the way, Lawrence,
We have now seen Peter Strzok and James Comey come before Congress. They raised their right hands, they went under oath, and they told us what they knew about the Russia investigation. The president continues to criticize them. However, what distinguishes them from him is that the president is unwilling to raise his right hand for special counsel. So it's his move.
We're going to be joined in the discussion now by David Frum. He's the senior editor of The Atlantic. He's the author of Trumpocracy, The Corruption of the American Republic. David Frum, you've got 9 hours and 41 minutes of hearing testimony to react to. Take your pick.
Look, if you're the lawyer for the Corleone family and your clients are super, super guilty, of course it's your duty to attack the investigators and to find some procedural offense. And that's your right, that's your job, and that's their right. But it doesn't make them honest, upright waste management specialists. We are watching today, at the same time on our other screen from what happened in Washington, we are watching an attack on NATO, an attack on the U.S.-UK alliance, Donald Trump trying to topple friendly governments, and in every way carrying out a Russian foreign policy agenda. And the question every American has is he doing this because he's misinformed, because he's impulsive, or is there some darker reason? And we need to get to the bottom of that. And the Republicans investigating the FBI are acting like lawyers for the Corleone family, and they are looking at some genuine procedural missteps that took place. But what they're not interested in the question of, what's the truth here? How are we going to defend the country? Is the president in some way compromised as we watch this wrecking ball that is happening in Europe and the prospect that 75 years of security arrangements are about to be destroyed by one man with this giant question mark hanging over his head?
Congressman Swalwell, it seemed to me that the Republicans, especially Chairman Goodlatte, were not ready for some of the parliamentary procedural challenges that you and your colleagues raised on the Democratic side as they were trying to just kind of steamroll the witness and demand that the witness answer questions that FBI lawyers had said he could not answer, threaten the witness with contempt charges in that setting. Was it your sense that the Republicans were not actually prepared to handle this hearing today, and that they were surprised at how strong Agent Strzok's responses could be when he was allowed to deliver them?
They were wholly unprepared. Lawrence, when I saw Mr. Strzok 2 weeks ago at our closed hearing deposition, I thought, oh boy, the Republicans, this is going to really backfire, because he's a pretty bright guy. He made a monumental error in judgment in some of those text messages, but he's a bright guy with a pretty sterling career, and I think you saw that on display today. But this is also the result of what's been building up over the past year, where we've seen the chairman use this committee to just go back in time, to keep revisiting the Hillary Clinton email investigation in every possible form. And so I think our members, you saw just kind of the release of that frustration. And we came ready to fight for our democracy and the rule of law.
And David Frum, the Republicans in the committee seem to have a single rule about investigating Donald Trump. You can only be allowed to investigate Donald Trump if you enthusiastically wanted Donald Trump to become president of the United States.
Yes, you can't make any comment. Donald Trump is, of course, the chief law enforcement officer of the United States. He has described members of Central American gangs as animals. And those Central American gangs are certainly very, criminal organizations. But if the suggestion is that animus by law enforcement means that the laws can't be enforced, then I don't know how we're ever going to put any member of any Central American gang ever in jail ever again.
Congressman Eric Swalwell and David Frum, thank you both for starting us off tonight.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.